Okay, so if any person is trying to visit an Amazon website, which is further connected to backend database, so while trying to create a new account on Amazon, there are few details which he needs to mention. The first thing is first name. The second one is your last name. That means your complete name, including first name, last name. Apart from this, we also need to mention basic contact details. What is his contact number? Um, Including contact, we also need to mention email ID. Email ID. Apart from email ID, we can also mention address. Apart from address, there is one more thing, which is our date of birth. Now, let's do not go with date of birth directly. Assume that we need to mention our age. Depending on date of birth, whatever we try to enter, we can, I mean, that specific website can also guess our age. That is also possible, and that's the only ideal approach which any website uses. Now, let's do not directly jump to the date time, data type, or date data type today. We'll first understand we need to mention an age there. Now, these are few criterias which we need to take into account. Now, let's create a database. I mean, let's create a table which acts like a backend database, which acts like a backend table, which is further connected to Amazon. Let me open the, okay. Now, very first thing, whenever you're logging in, we need to use a specific database. Unless and until if you do not use this keyword, or if you do not use a specific database, you cannot do anything. Let me create a table. Create table, Amazon info. What all information we have? First name. First name. We have last name. We have contact. We have email ID. And we have age of that specific person who's trying to create a new account. Now, we can directly mention the data types also. As we have declared our columns, we can directly go ahead and mention our data types as well. Now, first name is varchar, variable characters, and we can define a specific size. Maybe I'll keep it to 200 because few people names are, I mean, very large or very big in characters count. I'll make it to 200 again, last name. Contact information is, what can be the data type for contact? We might have discussed yesterday. What can be the data type for contact?
Integer.
How come?
Big int.
See, blindly do not go with integer. Integer has a certain limit. As I've said, if you take an integer, this is what the maximum integer can take. Our mobile numbers never start with 2. I mean, up till now, it is not yet starting with 2. Probably we start with 6, 7, 8, or 9. So this is the maximum size an integer can accept. If you want to go beyond this, I mean, even 6, 8 also, integer will not accept. So if you want to mention our mobile numbers, it has to be a big int. This is integer. I mean, bigger than integer is your big int. Big int this way. Email ID is again varchar because it's a combination of both special characters and our numerics also, and age. Now, what can be the best fit for age? Even here, we might have seen one of the integer data type. What can be the best fit? If you
Tiny
could read. Okay, very good. Tiny int. Need not mention a size. I mean, not even comma is required here. Okay, now this looks good. See, we can directly go ahead and create this table. Now, prior creating this table, let's first understand, let's first think about our background. I mean, how amount of people, what type of people can come and who can create their accounts in Amazon. Now, assume that there is some person who's trying to log into this website, which is further connected to the database, and he's trying to create an account. Now, his first name is, not every person who's trying to create an account will always mention all the details correctly. And that is a fact. if you check any social networking websites, if you check even your Amazons also, there are many kind of random accounts which are not yet active or which are not active also. They try to create their account and they'll never log in. So there are many random accounts, bot accounts, which are already created. Now, assume that a person is trying to create an account, he mentions some name. He's trying to mention some name, right? There's a person with name Arjun. He's trying to create an account. So he's mentioned first name as Arjun. Again, coming down, the second condition is the Amazon is asking is mention your last name. So he doesn't want to mention his last name. He'll again go with Arjun. So here, what we have declared, varchar. We are not checking whether first name and last name are same or not. We are directly mentioning the data type, giving the data type size, that's it. So this person can come down here, he can mention his first name as Arjun, he can mention his last name as Arjun as well. Now coming down to your contact, while mentioning the contact also, he may not mention the correct count of mobile number, or maybe the mobile number which is trying to mention, accepted 10 digits, a mobile number can be accepted. But if he's mentioning some random numbers, maybe 6 or 7 numbers also, even that can be a possibility. So 7 digits is not accepted here. It has to be exactly 10 digits. Email ID, some random email ID is trying to mention. Or maybe he's using an email ID which is already present in the Amazon's database. That can be a possibility. So same email ID or duplicate of email ID. Address, we cannot do any checkpoint for address. Address can be anything. Some might mention his complete address. Some of the individuals might not mention the complete address. That cannot be a possible checkpoint. But in case of age also, usually a person is asked the date of birth details, not the exact age. But assuming that we are mentioning age here, so he might end up mentioning some random age also. Even he can mention some minus 125 or even minus 120 or even minus 50. That can be a possible condition because tiny int always starts from minus 127 to plus 128. Or sorry, minus 128 to plus 127. So even minus digits can be entered in age. We haven't used any checkpoint here. So there are multiple checkpoints which we are missing. We are creating a table, accepted. We are mentioning the data type, accepted. But using these data types also, there can be many drawbacks. First name, last name can be same. Contact cannot be the exact 10-digit count. Email ID can be duplicate. Age can be any random number. If he is mentioning negative also, tiny int can take negative as well. So there are many checkpoints which we are missing while creating a table. So this is one of the drawback which we haven't covered up till now. Now, for every drawback, there is some new update. There is some new concept which is being introduced. So that new concept is called as checkpoints. So checkpoints are usually called as constraints in SQL. There are multiple constraints which are available in SQL. Now, with the help of these constraints, it will help us to improvise. It will help us to, reduce some manual effort, because if you mention these constraints, whatever information is being getting loaded to that specific table, that would be very precise information. You have to mention that checkpoints, you have to mention that constraints very correctly, accurately. Now, what all constraints we have? There are multiple constraints. Directly jumping to a higher constraint, let's assume it as keys. There are two types of keys, not even two types, there are many types of keys. But from a data analyst point of perspective, there are two keys which are much important while creating any specific database. We'll discuss both the keys. There is some key constraint, there is some not null constraint, there is some check constraint, there is some unique constraint. So these are all the constraints which are available. Let me open just a moment. Let me explain
Hi
it with.
Ritesh.
Hey, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. But again, what is constraints? Because we are not be aware of what is constraints and all.
Now you
So
will
if
get
you
an
are
idea.
given,
You'll get an idea. Just a moment. I'll show you the constraints basic idea so that you'll
okay,
get some understanding.
okay, thank you.
So these are the uh, most widely used constraints, which will help us to solve our problem. Now, our problem, ideal problem is this. If a person is trying to enter information which should not be, I mean, first name, last name should not be same. It has to be very correct. It has to be very precise. So constraints will help us to reduce this all duplicates, reduce all the fake information which an individual is trying to enter to that specific database. It will refrain entering, it will refrain taking all this information whenever a person is trying to enter these kinds of information, might be negative age, might be 7-digit or 8-digit contact number, might be duplicate email ID, might be same name and first name and last name. So it will throw an error. It will never take that information. It will never ingest that information in the table. It will always throw an error. So with the help of constraints, it will help us to reduce all this duplicacy of data, this fake information, which can be reduced. Now, if I give you certain idea, these are the number of constraints from a data analyst, from a SQL point of perspective, most widely used constraints. One is not null, one is unique, one is primary key, one is foreign key. So I might have kept it to only key here. So keys are two keys, primary key and foreign key. Uh, we have seen one is check constraint and one is default constraint. Now, what does these constraints justify? What does these constraints, how is it present and what does they justify? Let's take an example. Let's take a small example. Let me show you. So we'll start with the primary key and foreign key explanation, and then we'll jump to the other constraints. Other constraints are very easy to understand and straightforward, but primary key and foreign key are slightly different. Now, the same Amazon example I've taken, there is a table called as customer information. And this customer information has information related to a certain set of people who are creating an account on Amazon on whatever date they are registering. This is date of register. DOR is date of register. And from which city he is trying to register. Name, date of register, and from which city he is trying to register. So these many people have registered, and you can see there can be a person with same name. Kiran from Delhi and Kiran from Calcutta has mentioned or maybe has created an account on Amazon, and his details are registered under this customer information table. Now there is one more table called as sales information, and in the sales information, these are the products which an individual has purchased. Now, let me clear one thing. There can be a person who haven't created an account on Amazon, but still he can purchase a product. There is a possibility. How? Because he doesn't have an account. What he'll do, he'll directly visit to a website. He'll try to search a product. He'll try to add that product to cart, and he'll end up using a payment, but without logging, without creating an account. He might end up using it as a guest user. I'm a guest user. I need not mention, I need not create any account. I'll be continuing with all my process as a guest user also. So there can be a possibility a person may not have Amazon account created, but still he can purchase a product on Amazon or it with respect to any sales website, maybe even your Flipkart. Without your Flipkart account, also with a guest user login, without any login, just as a guest user, continue as a guest user, you can still purchase a product. So that can be a possibility. So if you see the comparison here, John from Bangalore has purchased an iPhone. The sales amount is also mentioned. Arjun from Chennai has also purchased a product, Samsung, from $12,500. Again, the same person, Arjun, has purchased a product, Vivo, of 9,000. Now, if I come down to Kiran, Kiran has purchased a product, MI, which is around 7,500. Now, the question here is, among these two, who is the Kiran who have purchased this product? If anyone can look on these two tables and answer who amongst these two has purchased, I mean, there are two Kirans, either from Delhi or either Kiran from Calcutta has purchased this MI product, which is costing 7,500. How do we make sure that which of the Kiran has purchased a product?
We can't know, sir.
Okay. And that's the correct answer. We can't know. Now, why is it when that difficult to decide who among these two Kirans have purchased? Because there is one column which is missing. This is, I'll give you that column so that it will give you a better information. If you see the second table, I've added one more column which is called as user ID. So with the help of user ID column, that means a person is trying to create an account. Whenever he's trying to create an account, there's some specific ID assigned to it. With the help of that user ID, it is very easier to guess who amongst that Kiran have purchased that product. So you can see Kiran from Calcutta has purchased that MI product, which is costing 7,500. There is no need to mention the name of that person who have purchased. If you even only mention the user ID, that is more than enough. And a single person can purchase multiple products. That can be a case. So Arjun is trying to purchase multiple products here. So what does this convey here is, with the help of numerical column, with the help of some unique identity column, it is very easier to guess what that person, what that person has purchased, even though there are duplicates of name. First name, last name cannot be same, but the name of person or surnames of person of multiple individuals can be same. So there is a possibility. For a same person, first and last name cannot be same. But first name for different individuals can be same, last name for different individuals can be same. There can be a possibility. So if with only names, it is very difficult to guess who amongst this person has purchased a product. So with this, with a unique user ID, with a unique, maybe a numerical column, it is very easier to guess which amongst the person has purchased this specific product. Now, with this unique column, this specific unique column is called as a primary key. Now, what do you mean by primary key? What do you mean by primary key? See, primary key is nothing but which is always unique. If you see here, 001, 002, 003, even for Kiran also 4 and 5, it is unique because one of the Kiran is from Delhi and is registering in 2012, but the other Kiran is from Calcutta. He has registered in 2008. Ideally, this Kiran should be first year, because he has registered. So his email ID, his user ID should be 004. But accepted, every user IDs are unique. You can see for every name, it has created a unique user ID. So this is called as a primary key. This is called as a primary key. And the key which is further connected to the sales information, which is helping us who amongst these customer individual, who amongst these customers have purchased any product. This specific key is called as a foreign key. Now, foreign key is always dependent on a primary key. Is always dependent on a primary key. And you can see foreign key can be duplicated or repeated values can be used. Why? Because the same individual can purchase multiple products. Now, let me give you a simple description, or let me make it more simpler. Come down. In case of keys, one is primary key and the other one is foreign key. See, in case of primary key, what is the behavior of a primary key? It has to be unique. It has to be always unique. There is no chance of duplicacy of data. It has to be always unique. Now, one more condition from a primary key is it cannot accept nulls. Cannot accept nulls. It has to be unique. That means it will never accept blanks also, because every blank is a similar condition. Blanks are not unique. Nulls are unique, but it cannot even accept null. Primary key, it cannot even accept null. Nulls are not recommended because null value can be anything. So if you take null and if that anything value is a duplicated value, that means it is no use. So it has to be unique. So primary key is not accept, will not accept nulls also. Now, in case of foreign key, how does a foreign key works? foreign key is dependent on primary key, because with the help of primary key only, foreign key will help us to identify which individual has purchased what kind of product in the example which I've taken. This is a foreign key. So from this sales information, we can guess which individual has purchased what kind of product with the help of key, which is further connected to a primary constraint. So foreign key is always dependent on a primary key. Now, in some cases, foreign key can be null. Now, how is it possible? I've taken one example, foreign key can be null. And it can take n number of nulls. It can take n number of nulls. Now, how is it possible? Let me take an example.
Where the customer is not registered.
Yep, very good. Where the customer is not registered, so he will be acting as there is no user ID. So he'll be purchasing that specific product as a default, maybe as a guest login. So for guest login, there is no specific ID mentioned to it. I assume that there is a person who is trying to log into this Amazon, and he doesn't have any unique ID. I mean, he's not creating any account. So it's directly going, he's trying to purchase some product, maybe Redmi product. He hasn't registered in the Amazon website. He's directly purchasing. So if he's directly purchasing, there is no ID. That means it is null. It is purely null. There is no value for that user ID. And he's trying to purchase a product. So in that case, foreign key can always accept nulls. It can accept duplicates. Why? Because the same person can purchase multiple products. It can accept nulls because a person may not create always an account for that specific website. He might as an anonymous user, he might log in as a default user, and he might end up purchasing the product, guest user. So there can be a possibility. So that is how the primary key and foreign key works. Foreign key is always dependent on primary key, but foreign key can also accept nulls. There is a possibility it can also accept nulls. And if you take null here, there is no dependency of primary key. There is not at all dependency of primary key. So 90% of the time it is dependent, but for 10%, wherever there are coming, wherever the values are null, there is no dependency. Why? Because he has logged in as a guest user. So that is the behavior of a foreign key. That is the conditions of a foreign key. So foreign key can be null. It can take duplicates. It can take duplicates. It is not unique. Foreign key is not unique. Whereas primary key is always unique. It is always unique. And to be frank, every null value is unique, accepted. But it is not recommended to take any nulls in primary key. Why? Because if you take a null, there is no value present in that null. A null can be a same value, a null can be any different value also. So in that case, it is violating a default constraint, which is unique. It is always unique. Primary key has to be unique. Now, let me explain it with the example. So if a person is trying to log into that website, a unique ID is assigned, which is 101. Again, one more person is trying to log in. A unique ID is assigned as 102. So it will go on adding, incrementing itself. So some random person is trying to log in and is not mentioning any, the website itself is not mentioning, or the database itself is not mentioning any unique ID to it. So accept it as null. So assuming that it's a null, in case in future, if a person is again logging with some, a new person is trying to log in, ideally it should take 103, but again it is taking 102 here, some cases, or maybe in null condition also, sometimes it will take 102. Here itself, it is violating the unique constraint. Null can be unique, but if at all the value is replaced with null is replaced with 102, it is violating the primary key unique constraint. So primary key is always unique and it will never ever accept null. Never ever accept null. And keep it in mind, this is also asked in interviews. Wherever you are mentioning primary key, it has to be unique. It will not accept nulls. Whereas in case of foreign key, it can take nulls. It is dependent on primary key and it can even take duplicates. That means it is not unique. Now I'll take a pause. If you have any questions here, feel free to ask. Now, whenever once we mention the primary key and foreign key in our databases, it will clarify your doubts, most of your doubts. But still, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Hi, Ritesh.
Yes, Neha. Yeah, go ahead.
I have one doubt. If the foreign key is null, then how that is connected with the primary key table?
Now, as I've said, most of the times, foreign key is always dependent on primary key. Why? Because if you go to this example, the user ID is not created here. The user ID is coming from the primary table. User ID is only used to identify which customer has purchased what kind of product. So foreign key is not default created. Whenever you mention a foreign key, it is not default created. If you mention primary key only, then foreign key can be mentioned. You cannot directly create foreign key. If you only create a primary key, only then foreign key can be created. If you're directly creating a sales information table and you are mentioning foreign key, it will never take. Foreign key is always dependent on primary key. But one thing for sure, foreign key behaves such a way that it can take nulls. It can take nulls. See, if you are directly creating the sales information table and you are mentioning user ID as foreign key, it will never take. You have to mention a primary key first. Only then you can create one more table and that primary key can be connected as a foreign key to that table. See, this key itself is connecting here. We haven't created any new column here. This user ID column itself is connected to the sales information as a foreign key.
Yeah, I got this point, but I wanted to know in case of guest user, how the data is updated in the sales information. Because there
Now,
is no
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
will not be any customer information in case of the guest user, right? In that
Okay.
case, how the data is updated in sales?
Now, see, both the tables are independent. It might be connected using keys, but if a certain person is trying to log in an Amazon website, Amazon will never prompt you to create a website at the very first instance. Still, their primary focus is whether we are selling our products or not. We are getting customer information, least bothered they are. If you log in, if you do not log in, they are least bothered. So that is the reason they are always focusing on whether the product is sold or not. So if any specific website was trying to sell a product, in order to sell a product, it is not recommended to always log in. Any website you can take, any website, any application you can take. Every application will never recommend you to create an account. It will always ask you to continue with your guest login also. At the last, it will ask you for certain details, maybe your address, maybe your contact number, just because for delivery, you should be, that detail should be available. So sales information, a person can directly log in and create, without any user ID, he can purchase a product. That can be a possibility. He may need not log in every time and his information is always stored in the customer information. Amazon's ideal approach is whether the product is getting sold or not. That's it. If you log in as a guest user, at the last, it will only ask you for contact number. At the last, it will only ask you for address, just because they want to deliver the product. They'll never ask you to mention your email IDs. They'll never ask you to mention your other details, your name, first name. That is not recommended. Only if you mention your first name also, and if you mention the address also at the last, that can be a possible condition. They can deliver a product. But if you're trying to create the account, they will always ask you for email ID. They will always ask you for the date of birth. So these kind of details are always present in the customer information. Whereas the other table, which is dependent on customer information, it is not required because sales is the primary focus which every customer is, which every the company is looking out for.
Okay, Ritesh, got it. So, if in case of guest user, the sales information table is directly updated with product ID and sales with user ID blank, right?
Yes, user ID would be null, and product ID is what kind of product they have purchased. What is their total sales? That's it.
Okay.
This is how it will
Second,
look alike. And if I mention the sales, you can mention the sales as well. Some $8,000. There is no mentioning of user ID. That means there is no user created with this user ID, or maybe there is no user ID which is available in the customer information table. And these two constraints are slightly different to understand. I'm not saying it is difficult. If you think it in real term, it is very easier to guess. It is very easier to understand also. Primary key and foreign key. But as I've said, these two constraints are the only two constraints which are slightly different to understand. Maybe it will take some time for few of the individuals. But apart from these two, if I go and check the other constraints are these. Not null. Not null constraint is pretty straightforward. If I take the same example where we were creating a table, let's go back here. See, any website you're trying to log in, your last name can be null. You're not interested to mention your last name, accepted, but your first name should not be null. If an individual is coming and is not mentioning the first name, there is no use. So you can use a not null constraint here. He has to mention the name. He has to mention the first name. So we can use a not null constraint here. Not null means he has to mention some information. Without mentioning any information, he cannot go back. He cannot go further. So not null can be one constraint. There is one more constraint called as unique. Unique is straightforward. Your contact number should also be unique. Maybe your email ID should also be unique. There shouldn't be any duplicate email IDs. If a person is trying to create an account with some email ID, and that same email ID is again used for some other account, that could not be the case. So email IDs has to be unique. Accepted contact numbers can be same for multiple individuals. Maybe he's trying to create a different account with different names, but same contact number, that can be possible. But with same email ID, it is not recommended to have a same account. So email ID can be unique. It has to be unique. No duplicate email IDs can be used. So unique is straightforward. Now check constraint. Now what do you mean by check constraint? See, in case if a person is mentioning only 7 digits of mobile or contact number, that is purely wrong information. It has to be dot 10 digits. So this check constraint will help me whether the length of a mobile number is 10 digits or not. Length of mobile number equal to 10. If at all an individual is mentioning mobile number is 10 digits, only then this information would be captured. So with the help of this check constraint, it is time to check length of a mobile number is equal to 10 digits or not. So this is a check constraint. It is trying to check that information. And what the last constraint is, it's a default constraint. Now default constraint means, see, whenever you're creating an account, there is some condition also. It will take from which country you're trying to log in. When which country you're trying to create an account, it will take that information also. Now, if you're logging from India, it would be amazon.in. So Amazon itself will defaultly assume that if you're logging from amazon.in, that URL, that means you're from India. If you're logging from amazon.au, it is from Australia. If it is .uk, it is from UK. If it is .us, it is from USA. So with the help of that URLs, Amazon is smart enough, that website is also smart enough to understand from which country you're logging. So they may not ask you to mention your country details every time, but still that country column is present in that table, backend table. Now, with the help of that .in.au.uk, it will take default country names. So default country, I mean, default condition we can mention. Default, maybe if you're logging from India only, accept, I mean, this table is only with specific to India. So mention it as default India. So default constraint means if you're not even mentioning your country, default, it will take as India. In case wherever there is a default condition, if you do not mention anything, it will take that default condition which is mentioned. So that is how a default constraint works. Now, few of might find it very difficult to understand all these constraints. Let's go back. Let's utilize that constraints. Let's create that constraints here itself. So we have created a table. Let me mention country also. Country. And what is it is? Varchar. And what I'll do, I'll mention a default constraint. Default. If a person is not mentioning his country, it should default take it as India. That's it. So I've mentioned one constraint here. For age, it is tiny int, but tiny int can take negatives. That is a possible condition. But how to make sure his age is always greater than, I mean, 0, and it should be less than 120. Tiny int, usually anyways, it will take up to 128 only. So, but it should be always greater than 0. So with the help of check constraint, check age, it should be always greater than 0. This is what I've mentioned it as one constraint. So this check constraint, what it will do, every time if age is greater than 0, only then it will take. Maybe you can mention it as greater than 10 also, or maybe greater than 18. A person with more than 18 years of age only has to log into that specific Amazon website. Less than 18 years, maybe he's a child, he's not an adult. So you can mention whatever age condition you want, and tiny int anyways, it will take up to 127, 128. There's no problem. If you want multiple conditions, you can use age greater than 18 and age smaller than 100. You can use multiple conditions. So this is trying to check whether the age is greater than 18 and whether the age is smaller than 100 or not. Only then it will take that information in this table, whatever information we are mentioning. Now, in case of email ID has to be unique. But prior to unique, email ID has to be not null. You cannot take null email IDs. So what I'll do, see, one thing I'll mention, I'll first go with unique. It has to be unique, accepted. At the last, it has to be not null. Now, if you want to mention both the constraints for a single column, you have to mention it downwards. You have to mention it downwards. Email ID, it has to be not null. Now we'll discuss it. There would be some error, and how do you solve? How do you make sure that error is removed? We'll discuss it. Now contact. See, contact also it has to be of 10 digits, not less than 10 digits. So with the help of check constraint, contact has to be 10 digits only. So if you directly mention it as 10, see, this will not work. Why? Because what we are trying to convey, age accepted, whatever age we are mentioning, age is greater than 18, age is small, it should be smaller than 100. But if you directly mention contact equal to 10, that means what? What it is trying to convey? Contact is big int. It can take any number. It can take less than 10 also, it can take greater than 10 also. Even that is a possible condition. But what should be, I mean, what should be the 10? What should be the count of 10? Length of that. So there is a keyword called as length, or maybe there is a function called as length. Length of a contact number should be equal to 10. not contact. It should be length of a contact. So I've used a check constraint here. Now, first name and last name. What I'll do for last name, I'll use a not null because both the names are must. Even for first name also, I'll use a not null. Now, in case if a person is mentioning same first name and last name, in that case, it has to be wrong. So again, I have to mention one more constraint. Check. I'm trying to check whether first name is not equal to last name. This is one more constraint I'm adding. See, if you want to add multiple constraints to that same column, first name and last name, we have already added not null, not null. But I again want to add check constraint whether first name is equal to last name. It should not be equal. This is not equal sign. It should not be always equal to last name. Both the names should be unique. That should be different. Unique in the sense both the names should be different. So in that case, I'm using check constraint again. So if you want to use one more constraint to that specific column, you have to use at the end. Now, again, I have used not null here, not null email ID. Email ID. Now, the thing is, if I try to create a table, it will always throw an error. Now, what is the syntax error? Accepted, I am mentioning email ID is unique. It is not null. How come email ID? I mean, null can be one unique. I mean, null's unique. If you are mentioning unique, every null is a unique condition. Every null is a unique condition. So it can take nulls. That is the reason I don't want to take nulls. I have mentioned not null email ID. But why is it giving error is, see, if you mention not null and if you mention unique, only then it will work properly. Why? Because not null means if a person is not even mentioning any nulls and it has to be unique, only then this will work properly. If you see the error is gone, if I create this, first name, oh, okay, here, underscore we have missed. A table is created. Just because interchanging the position of constraints also, it will help us to solve our problem. Unique should come last. Ideal thing is email ID should not be null, first thing. After that, it has to be unique. Only then it will work properly. So wherever you are mentioning what kind of constraints, that also plays an important role. It is just like English. As I've said, SQL is just like English. What comes first, what comes last? It has to be the grammatical condition. So first not null you have to take, and then you have to take unique for the email ID. Now the table is created. Let me insert few values. Insert into Amazon underscore info values.
Sir, one small doubt.
Go ahead.
Sometimes in the mail ID column, uh, there should be at the rate symbol. Like, sometimes we miss the at the rate symbol. So how to ensure that this the mail ID entered is proper,
Good
is
question.
correct?
So we can use a check constraint whether that at the rate is present or not. There is a possible, I'll explain it. I'll definitely explain it. How do we check that at the rate condition is not present or not? But for now, let's understand. I'll explain it. And that should be the ideal condition for email ID, including not null, including unique, at the rate symbol, .com or .in, whatever country's condition or URL you're using, that email website you're using, it has to be present. So we need to mention that also. I'll explain that as well. But for now, just understand it has to be not null and unique first.
Ritesh,
Hmm.
contact number also should be unique, right? So are you not mentioning
Accepted
it?
contact number, we can also take unique. You can mention it here also. You can mention here also. But the thing is, see, if a certain person, I'm assuming that certain person is using that same email number, same contact number for multiple account creation. There can be a possibility. I am assuming email ID has to be unique. That is what I have assumed. You can take unique, you can take, it is up to us. For my understanding, I have kept it unique. The primary contact information should be, length should be equal to 10.
So not null is also not required for the contact.
Yeah, you can take, if you want, you can take here unique and not null. Multiple conditions are there for the same column. You can take downstage, I mean, at the last. Okay, now let me mention few names. The same name, Arjun, comma. Again, I'll mention the same name. Let's see if it will take or not. Comma, contact info. So this is a 10-digit contact info. Email ID. Now see, for contact, I might have mentioned inverted commas. See, if you can mention inverted commas for integer, you can mention inverted commas for any data type, any information you are inserting. But it is not compulsion. If you do not mention this also, it will still work. It is not compulsion, but I'm making sure that I'm mentioning inverted commas. And one thing also, if a person is trying to mention double inverted commas, and if a person is trying to mention single inverted and closing with single inverted commas, it is not recommended. If you're using double inverted, close with double inverted. The error is gone. And it is always recommended to go with single inverted commas, not with double, because double will highlight something. If you want to highlight some information, you can give double inverted commas. Single is more than enough. Now, I mentioned email ID, I mentioned contact. Let me mention age. Now I'll randomly mention some negative age. Big int can take negative age. Sorry, tiny int can take negative age. I've mentioned minus 50. Let me mention for age. Country, I'll not mention anything. I'll mention it as blank. Let me close it with semicolon. And let's try to insert this information. Let me make it big. See, first thing, check constant Amazon info check 2 is violated. Now what it is violating? First name and last name, both are same. That means it is violating this check constraint. Both are not null, but if I take it as null, it will violate the first constraint, which is not null. It should be not null. So if you're mentioning same name, it will always throw an error. So let me take some Arjun J. Now this is gone. Let me insert this. Check constraint Amazon. Again, it is giving me some check constraint. What check constraint it is violating? Contact is okay. Age. Okay. Let me remove this. Let me insert. This is correctly inserted. Now, if I see this, see, I haven't mentioned any country. Select start from hey, how come country it is taking it as null? Let me see. Default India. It is working fine. Let me see. Why is it taking it as blank? Ideally, it should have taken India. Just a moment. Now, unless you work on any specific SQL queries only, you will come across these drawbacks. Now, this is not a drawback, something we have missed. Because constraint is created correctly while creating the data, I mean, table itself, it haven't given me any error. The table has been created precisely. But default, are we missing something here? Let me think what we are missing.
It should be in brackets or something like that, sir.
No, not even in brackets. It should be in inverted commas. Default is working, okay. After default, I guess I'm missing some keyword. Default as or default is. That can be the case.
Hi, Ritesh. Is it because we've given
Good.
blank value?
Yes, very, very right. See, I have mentioned it as blank. That means I'm not mentioning, I haven't skipped this column. I've mentioned it as blank. So blank means some value. It is not null. Wherever you mention it as null. Now let me take some other column. That is what I've said. Let me remove this. But let's see. Whenever I mention as a default condition, I'll make sure 25. Now this will insert or not. I guess this will also violate a column count. Now, while inserting any specific value, that is how the default works. You have to mention all your column names. Probably, let me do that one thing. If I take it as null, I guess it will take it as, let's see what it is trying to take. It is trying to take null because null is also a condition. So we have to mention our column names, only then it will work properly. See, email ID which I'm mentioning, it is not correct. But still it is taking. How do we make sure that is correctly entered? I'll definitely explain you. That is a different constraint. I mean, you have to write multiple conditions there. Now, prior to that, let's first understand the basics. Now, what I'll do, I'll not mention this. Anyhow, I haven't mentioned that country. Let's insert this record. You have error. Check the valid correspond. What error we have? If anyone can guess what error we have here.
You have selected only 125 and then executed instead of selecting both 124.
Is it? Cool. Let me do. Now, if you see the default constraint is working. So the thing is, whenever you're mentioning a default constraint, it will always take from your specific URL or from which country you're trying to log in. So usually they'll never keep this column active. It's not recommended to keep this column active also because if an individual is coming from a specific country, default, it will capture that country details. Now that is how the default constraint will work. Now, any questions here? Now let's see. What I'll do, I'll mention one more record. Let me do that. I'll mention some random phone number. It's a 8-digit phone number. Now, in MySQL, this information may not be correctly visible, what error it is trying to convey. But if you're using some other SQLs, or maybe MySQL is further connected to your cloud. This we are using on-premise. But if you connect your MySQL to the cloud applications, in that case, the action window is slightly different there, the output action window. It will always give what constraint you're violating. Randomly, it is trying to say Amazon
Hello,
info
sir.
check
Good
one, it is
morning.
violating. Yeah.
Yes, Hannah. Oh, yes.
Now, here it is trying to say some check constraint is violating. What is that check constraint? If I go above, this is the first check constraint which we have mentioned. Check constraint 1, it is violating. How many check constraints are there? 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 different check constraints. So you have to go back and see which of the check constraint it is getting violated. At the first, we have mentioned first name and last name same. So it was giving it as check constraint 3. This is check constraint 3. In between, we have given some wrong age it was reflecting it as info check constraint 2. And now it is reflecting it as info check constraint 1. That means we are violating this contact number, the length of that contact. So if you mention it correctly, it will take it. Whether is it of 10 digits, it's again of 11 digits. Now, if I mention this, it will take it. Now, ideally, this should be starting with some 6. You can use one more constraint there also to check whether it is starting with 6 or not. But why? I mean, how do you make sure? Length is one of the function. There are multiple functions. So if I mention length here, it is highlighting some function, name of that function. If I go back, these many functions are there with respect to L. Now we would be discussing most of the functions, may not be all, but most of the functions. So if you want to check start, there would be some functions related to start, whether it is starting with start compare. There are multiple functions. So with the help of these functions, we can check whether it is starting with 6 or not, or maybe it should be equal or greater than 6, greater than 5. You can use that way also. Start of that contact number should be greater than 5. Should be always starting with 6. So there are multiple functions. You can use multiple constraints with the help of that functions. You can use one more check constraint and use that start string. Start string, it should be always greater than 5. Now, any questions on these constraints? See, we have only covered basics. In order to understand, first always create basics. Now, the thing is, we may not have covered primary key. We may not have covered foreign key. But if I go back, table first, table is dropped. First thing, I'll mention some unique ID to it. Amazon underscore customer underscore info. This is what the table name which I want. Wherever a customer is trying to create a new account in Amazon, a unique ID would be assigned to it. Now, there is an option to auto increment that unique ID also. There is a function called as auto increment. I'll explain it in tomorrow's session or maybe in further session. But for now, let's understand what I'll do. For ID, I'll take it as medium int. Or probably I'll take it as small int. Medium int is also not required. Small int is more than enough. Small int. See, once I mentioned small int, for ID, this ID is connected to some other table where the sales information is kept. So what should be the condition here? This ID should be unique. That means it has to be a primary key. If you mention primary key, default, it will take all the policies which primary key has. It has to be unique. It has to be not null. So if I mention primary key, that's it, more than enough. Whatever conditions are available with respect to primary key, it will take all that conditions. Now let me create this table again. Table is created. Let me copy this table. Come down. Now I'll mention some values to it. So I'm not mentioning India. So if you mention any name, it will take it, it will take that specific name. And there has to be some ID present. Right? Now what I'll do, I'll use a comma here and I'll mention some ID to it. 101. Okay. Let me insert this record. So this record is inserted. You can see that record is inserted. Now, if I again copy this, and if I paste it here, see, I'm using the same email ID, same ID, the customer ID. And let me mention mine. Probably I'll mention mine. Okay. Now, if I insert this, it will throw an error. Why? Because duplicate entry for key Amazon cust info primary. It will never take duplicates. It will never take duplicates. It has to be unique. Now it, as you can see, the information is correctly inserted and primary key constraint is working properly here. So constraints play an important role with respect to data, with respect to the table which you're creating in that database. Constraints will help us to reduce fake information, duplicate information, any random junk information. If you want to make sure that junk information is not updated in your tables, make sure you are using the constraints wisely. And there are many, constraints are only 6. We have discussed. There are 6 different more. In case of keys, there are more keys also. But from a data analyst point of perspective, that advanced keys are not much required. I'll explain what all keys are present with respect to primary and foreign key. There are few more keys. There is a super key, there is a candidate key, but how that super key, how that candidate key, how a secondary key will work, I'll definitely explain. But that is not our piece of cake. From a data point of perspective, from a database developer also, primary key and foreign key are more than enough. So these 6 constraints will help us to reduce junk information to be uploaded or to be inserted in any specific table. Now let's see. There is one more condition which we have discussed. Let me insert that record and let's see. Create one more insert statement. Incorrect integer value. So integer will never take blank. It will never ever take blank. Now, what I'll do, I will copy the names. I'll not mention that integer value. Right? I'm skipping that, and at the last, I guess it's a country. So TRY country. Let's keep it. And I'll remove this. Field ID doesn't have a default value. Ideally, it should have taken it as null because we are not mentioning ID. But why is it throwing an error? It is throwing an error just because primary key will never take any default values. That means if at all it is a null, it will never take that null also. We are violating that primary key constraint. There has to be some value which has to be present. If you want some default value to be automatically applied to that primary key, it has to be auto increment. There is a concept called as auto increment. If you mention auto increment here and from which number you want to auto increment, you have to mention that. That's it. From that specific number, whenever you insert a new record, it will automatically increment one after the other. So we have seen primary key. I'll also explain foreign key, how foreign key works. There we have to create a one more table where sales information is kept. And while creating a foreign key, you have to mention to which column that foreign key is dependent on. From which table to which column. You have to mention that way. And I guess till now, we have seen how a commit works. But in case of commit, you have to make sure you are keeping that option. Where is it? Yeah, here. Let me go back. Grant, revoke, select, alter. Now, in case how a commit works, the transaction control language. See, you have to always keep this set auto commit equal to 0. So whatever information you are mentioning, that information would not be automatically committed. And how rollback, how save point, and how commit. See, commit, we are not using anything. We are not using anything. But accept that there is a table with this information. There is no information present here. And I'm trying to insert these records. So once you insert these records, at this specific point, what I've mentioned, save point. Save point means up till this, I'm trying to save some information. Up till this, information is saved. So this is how a save point is used. Now, assuming that there is some Rakesh information. Now, if I roll back,
Hi, Ritesh. Is it because it was start transaction?
no, it will work. The thing is, what we are roll back. The thing, we haven't changed anything. What can we roll back? Unless we update something, only then we can roll back. Now I'll update some information. And if you see, wherever the student name is Ramesh, there is no Ramesh, it seems. Let me update it for Rakesh. Okay, it is updated for Rakesh only. So where the Rakesh information got updated to Ramesh. Now if I check this, so it was Rakesh earlier, it got updated to Ramesh. But I want to roll it back. Whatever update I've done, I want to roll it back. Let me roll it back. Right. The save point is correctly working. Let me do this way. Delete from this. Sometimes works weird. Take this roll back. There is no information present. Table is blank. Let me update. I'm trying to save it till here. Let me update this information. Save point ABC does not exist. Cool. The thing is, they are missing something. Start transaction. I guess we are missing this thing. So let me delete it again. The table is blank. See, while working on this save point and rollback, you have to make sure you're using it something. I guess I was missing the start transaction. Now let me save this. Let me update. And now let me see if I can roll back. Now it is working. See, if you see, you have to mention it as start transaction. You're starting from a certain point. So that was the reason it was not working. These are few SQL terms and conditions, rules and regulations, and you cannot skip that. Now, someone will have a question that why only I need to mention start transaction. That's the behavior of SQL. Your transaction starting from that specific point. From that point, you are inserting some records to that table. You are save pointing it at certain point, and you are updating some record. So you want to roll back that update, whatever update you have made, you can roll back it to whatever point you have mentioned. So that is how rollback works. That is how save point works. Now, apart from save point and rollback, what are the other two options?
Ritesh,
Commit. Yeah, go ahead.
Ritesh, previously you had mentioned save point Rakesh and rollback Rakesh, right? Now, why
No,
have
I
you
can
this?
mention.
How does that?
I can do
Okay.
that also. The thing is, I haven't mentioned start transaction at the first condition. Now, if I delete everything and if I insert the records are inserted, I can save point as Rakesh. And I'm trying to mention, I'm trying to update that Rakesh to Ramesh. And if I again want to roll back, this rollback will work.
But yesterday, like you did not mention about the start transaction, it was working fine.
That is the reason no, I haven't mentioned. Save point was working fine. Rollback was not working fine.
Okay.
I've only shown you how to write a rollback. I've not tested it.
Okay.
So that was the reason I'm trying to cover it today also. And to be frank, rollback, save point, this we never use as a data analyst. This is not our work to roll back or something, but just to make sure whenever you're committing some information and if you want to roll back, certainly this is how SQL works. So default commits are not kept on. It is always auto commit kept to 0. So you can roll back whatever information you have updated if there is some error. But first thing, always keep it in mind. If you're using update without where clause, if you're using delete without where clause, it is very dangerous.
Yeah.
So even in sleep, if you are being waked up, so there is some quick update which we want. And can you please update a query? Can you please update a record? Never ever update a record without where clause. Ask them, I mean, ask an individual who is reaching out to you where to use, where to update that information, what is the where condition. Only then go ahead and update it.
So like before every rollback, we have to create the start transaction.
Yep.
And before every
Start transaction, you can create it at any point. Now, again, if I've updated, I've rolled it back to Rakesh. Let me insert some record, or probably let me update some record here. I'll update something. I'll update student name to Arjun, where is from Pune. So Rajesh's name would be updated to Arjun. Right? Now this is done. What I'll do, I'll save point it here. Up till this point, I'm save pointing. Save point Arjun. Now, again, I'll come down. Again, I'll use an update.
Point, we have to create it like before updating, right?
No,
Because
no, no, not. See, do not get confused before update, after update. Save point means we are trying to save information up till that point.
Okay, okay.
Save point is save. I mean, we are saving that information up till that point. So I have saved up till Arjun, where his name is updated. Now, again, I'm coming down and trying to update student name, where student name is maybe what I'll do, I'll update it to some other name. I'll update it to Rahul. Arjun's name is updated to Rahul. Earlier, Rajesh's name is updated to Arjun. Now, Arjun's name is updated to Rahul. Now, what I'll do, I have saved point till Arjun. I'll update it, but I want to roll back again. This update, what I've made, I want to roll back. I can mention rollback here, roll back to whatever step you have mentioned. You want to roll it back to Arjun, you can roll it back to Arjun.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, why, man?
Hi, Ritesh. So for save point and rollback, do we need to use only the data instead of declaring a column name or something?
And to be frank, do not get confused here. See, save point, update, rollbacks are not much important for us. Just as a part and parcel of SQL transaction language, the transaction control language, I'm trying to explain it. And this MySQL instance also sometimes behaves weird. Now, behaves weird in the sense, in new update, every time you have to mention start transaction, it seems. Now, that is what I'm trying to guess. That is what I'm trying to guess. Wherever you are trying to use, you have to always start with a start transaction. That is not possible condition for all the. I mean, this is not same for any other SQL. In case of MySQL, in case of SQL Server, or in case of Oracle, or even in case of PostgreSQL, every time start transaction is not required. If you're saving that some information up till that point, you can roll it back to that point. There can, I mean, that possible condition is there. Need not mention start transaction every time. But yes, if you are using MySQL instance, that is how it works.
So, like I have a question. So suppose if we are inserting data through an ETL tool, around 100 records were entered like inserted into a table. So suppose if we need to roll back those 100 records at a time, is it possible? Like,
Yep. You can roll back.
because here we are saving
The thing
only
is,
Rakesh and one
see,
and rolling back only Rakesh, right?
if you are inserting a record, you can delete that records. If you are updating that records, you want to roll it back, you can still roll it back using that ETL tool itself. There itself, you can write your SQL query, just like how have you written the update query. You can write your the rollback query and you can roll it back. There is a possibility. That possible condition is there.
So we can mention a save point name and roll back to name.
While
That's it.
using ETL tool, it is not required to mention any save point. This is with respect to MySQL only. With respect to SQL Server, with respect to Oracle SQL, save point is not even required. Up till whatever point you are doing, you can roll it back to whatever step you want. In MySQL, that is how it works. Start transaction is required, save point is required. But in many other SQL tools, only commit and rollback is there. Up till whatever point you are committing, you can roll it back.
Okay, so after loading, like instead of mentioning it within the ETL, so can we do roll back in the SQL directly after inserting the records into the database table?
Yes, you can roll back.
Okay.
See, if you are using a commit statement like this, if you are committing something, you can roll it back.
Okay.
There is a keyword called as save point in MySQL only with respect to SQL Server, with respect to any other cloud-based SQL tools. There is no specific save point used there. They'll always go with commit or rollback. That's it. Only two statements are used. You are inserting, you are updating something, commit it. If you are not committing, or maybe if you have committed and you want to roll back, roll it back to that specific step. You can roll it back. Straightforward, it will work. There is no save point. There is no start transaction in any other SQL. And while using a commit, this commit will never work directly unless and until if you are keeping that auto commit equal to 0. If you keep it to 0, only in that case, the save point, only in that case, the other transactions, the commit rollback will work properly. So you have to always keep it to 0. And for update also, set SQL safe update should be equal to 0, without which update and delete query will never work. And I guess it was, yeah, go ahead.
There's a one more question. Okay. Once this commit transaction is executed, right? Can we roll back that transaction again?
Yes. That is what I'm
Okay.
trying to say. You can roll back. Even if you commit it, you can still roll back. Rollback is for what? You are committing something and you can roll it back.
So as you know, like through ETL, multiple tables will be inserted at a time. Like so, for whatever the table I have committed, if I need to roll back, what is the syntax like?
See, while using ETLs, one thing, keep it in mind, we will never use commit and rollback.
Okay.
In ETL, either it is truncate and load, either it is update, truncate or load, or either it is append and load. Append in the sense, whatever information is present, under that information, a new information would be loaded. This commit and rollback, keep it to your SQL instance only. This we will never use in your ETL, this never use in your any other tools. We will never use this. And I was
like
expecting.
Once the data is inserted through ETL, we can make it commit through SQL, right? Again.
That's it. It is not required to commit anything. SQL will automatically commit it. That's it. If you are entering it, it will automatically commit it. And see, do not get confused. Once again, I'm trying to say I was expecting questions on constraints, not on that commit, rollback. Commit and rollback, there is a limit. Up till that only you can keep it in mind. Do not. If you remember, if you forget also, let it be. There won't be any problem. There won't be any problem. Transaction control language is not our understanding, or maybe we are not, as a data analyst or as a SQL developer, we are not going back and checking whether the information is correctly done or not. In whatever you're using ETL tool, whatever information is coming from the cloud, it is automatically committed. After 1 hour, after 2 hours, the information is automatically committed. If you want to roll back, still you can roll back. But there is no possibility, or maybe usually user doesn't do all this commit and rollback from ETL tool. Either he'll drop everything and he'll again recreate it. Truncate and drop, truncate and load. And most of the cases, ETL is truncate and load. Most of the cases. Append and load is very rare. Truncate and load is most of the cases. If the data is very high, in that case, append and load. Append means whatever information is present, under that information, a new information would be loaded. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So from the today's class, like I'm trying to create the table with the constraints. When I have inserted only 2 rows, but in third row it shows null. Ritesh, is it same? Like I guess it's the same for you.
Third row is not null. Third row is not null. What it is trying to convey, there is no value present in the third row. See, if at all you come across this situation, I guess this is what you are expecting, or maybe you're experiencing. If I use this is what you're trying to say.
Yes,
See,
yes.
this is not null. Wherever there is a star, that means you are yet to insert some record here. Null means there can be any value. In future, as I've said, a null, in future, you can mention any value. If you insert one more record will come, and fourth condition would be this.
Okay, but in
This is the
yesterday's
ideal behavior of SQL.
okay, but in yesterday's tables, what we have created,
There you haven't seen, yes.
yes.
Why? Because our tables were randomly created. This table is created with all the constraints. This table is created with all the constraints. That is the reason you are seeing this condition. So what it is trying to convey, this star is trying to convey, this is the cursor here. This star is a pointer here. So from this line, you will insert a new value.
Okay, so this is the standard behavior.
Yeah, this is the standard behavior whenever you use all the constraints very precisely. Any questions? Maybe anything with respect to course?
Hi Ritesh.
Hey, go ahead.
So when Saturday and Sunday classes will start?
Saturday and Sunday, we will not have any sessions, ma'am. From Monday to Friday only. There would be some special sessions with respect to Agile, with respect to interview preparation, with respect to resume preparation. That would be on Saturdays. I'll refrain it doing it on Sundays because I want you people to also enjoy your one day in a week. So on Saturdays, I'll take it 1 hour, not every Saturday, but usually these kind of, non-technical sessions would be on Saturdays. And that would be between, see, if I give interview preparation now itself in 5 days, it is very difficult. So by end of this SQL, I would be starting with interview preparation with respect to SQL. Agile in between, I'll take in between SQL and Power BI. Okay, thank you. We would be continuing with the further advanced concepts from tomorrow. We have completed basics of constraints. There are a few more other constraints which are available, so that we would be covering in tomorrow's session.